You may not have a precise word for it yet, and you may not be able to point to a single moment and say that was when it happened. But if you have been paying attention over the last several days, through the blood moon eclipse, through the March 3rd portal, through the Venus-Uranus activation of yesterday, you have probably felt it. A quiet but unmistakable change in the quality of how you are seeing things. A change in what feels important and what has started to feel less so. A change in the direction your attention keeps pulling, even when you try to direct it elsewhere. March 8th is the day that change becomes harder to dismiss. Cosmic events rarely reveal their full impact on the night they occur. The blood moon eclipse was visually striking, emotionally intense, and energetically significant, but the magnitude of what it set in motion was not fully legible in that single night. The days that follow a major eclipse, particularly one as charged as the blood moon with its quality of deep culmination and emotional purging, are when the actual content of the shift becomes visible. When the dust settles enough that you can see what moved. When the realizations that the eclipse seeded finish germinating and break through the surface of your conscious awareness. Yesterday's Venus-Uranus energy accelerated that process. Uranus does not allow for gradual, comfortable integration. When it activates, it speeds things up. It takes the material that was already close to the surface, the recognitions, the honest assessments of situations and relationships, the desires that had been edited down to a safer version of themselves, and brings it to full visibility faster than you were planning for. The Venus dimension of that activation made the domain personal. The questions that got accelerated were not abstract. They were about what you want, who you want it with, what you have been investing in that is returning something real, and what you have been maintaining out of habit or fear rather than genuine alignment. Today, March 8th, you are sitting in the aftermath of both the eclipse and the Venus-Uranus activation, and what the aftermath is producing is a specific and important quality of knowing. Not the loud, urgent knowing of peak emotional activation. Something quieter and, in many ways, more durable. The kind of knowing that has settled past the initial charge and is still present. The kind that is not going away when the feeling passes because it is not entirely dependent on the feeling. It is sitting in a deeper layer of your awareness, and today it is pressing toward your full conscious attention. The astrological conditions producing this experience are worth understanding clearly. The eclipse cycle that has been running since mid-February has been doing the work of surfacing what was below the threshold of your direct awareness. The dynamics in your relationships that were running on autopilot, the misalignments between where you are and where your genuine energy is trying to take you, the truths about situations that were more comfortable to half know than to acknowledge fully. Mercury retrograde in Pisces, which is still active, has been keeping those surface matters in the foreground rather than allowing them to slip back underground, while also creating the perceptual conditions under which deeper emotional processing happens more readily. Venus and Uranus interacting yesterday introduced a sudden awakening quality into that already heightened perceptual environment. Venus rules what you love and what you value, and Uranus disrupts settled patterns in those domains with a clarity that arrives faster than the mind can organize a defense against it. The combination of a deep eclipse cycle processing and an acute Uranian awakening means that today you are likely operating with access to a level of honest self-knowledge that is not typically available in ordinary circumstances. The defenses are down. The comfortable ambiguities have been dissolved. What you are seeing about your life right now is closer to how things actually are than what you usually allow yourself to see. There are specific signs you may be noticing today, and they deserve your attention rather than your management. Unexpected clarity about a relationship. This is probably the most common and most significant experience of the Venus-Uranus aftermath. A relationship, and this can be any significant relationship, not only a romantic one, that you have been experiencing with some combination of confusion, hope, effort, and unresolved feeling has suddenly become more readable. The confusion has lifted enough that you can see the actual dynamic underneath it. What this person is genuinely offering, what the relationship is actually producing in your life, what the real level of mutuality is, These are more visible today than they have been in a long time, possibly more visible than they have been since the relationship began. That clarity may be welcome, or it may be uncomfortable. Sometimes the Venus-Uranus aftermath shows you that something you were uncertain about is actually solid, more real, more reciprocal, more aligned with what you need than your anxiety had been allowing you to see. Sometimes it shows you the gap you had been carefully not looking at directly. Either way, the clarity is doing useful work, and dismissing it because it is inconvenient or because acknowledging it would require something of you is a choice with real costs. A loss of attachment to something that recently felt important. One of the stranger and more disorienting features of this kind of activation is the experience of waking up and finding that the thing you were convinced mattered has simply stopped mattering with the same intensity. The goal you were working toward, the connection you were investing in, the version of your future you were organizing your present around. It is still there in the objective sense, but the emotional energy animating your relationship to it has shifted. The pull has weakened. The urgency you felt around it has quieted in a way that does not feel like giving up, but feels more like completion. Like the energy that was required to hold it in that position of importance has been redirected. This experience is worth sitting with rather than immediately trying to resolve it in one direction or another. The loss of attachment is not necessarily a signal to abandon what you were pursuing. It may be a signal that the version of it you were pursuing was not quite right, and that what is actually indicated is an adjustment, a recalibration of the goal or the relationship rather than a wholesale exit. Or it may genuinely be a completion, the cycle around this particular thing having run its course. You will know which it is if you sit with the loss of attachment long enough to hear what it is telling you rather than immediately responding to it with either renewed effort or immediate abandonment. A strong internal push to act differently than you have been acting. This is the Venus-Uranus energy at its most directional, not just showing you what is true but pressing you toward a specific adjustment. The push has a quality of insistence that distinguishes it from ordinary restlessness. Ordinary restlessness is diffuse. It wants to move, but does not particularly know where. The internal push of this activation is specific. It knows the direction. It has been pointing there with increasing clarity throughout the last several days. And today it is pressing hard enough that continuing to deflect it requires more energy than the deflection is worth. Coincidences that feel meaningful. The synchronicities that cluster around periods of genuine energetic activation have a specific quality that distinguishes them from ordinary coincidence. They have too much precision to feel entirely random, and they consistently point toward a specific domain or question. Two completely unrelated events both touching on the same theme in your life. A piece of information arriving through an unexpected channel that is directly relevant to something you were privately considering. A name appearing in 3 unrelated contexts in a single day. These synchronicities are not the universe sending you a coded personal message. They are your awareness, running at elevated sensitivity, noticing connections that are always present but are only visible when the perceptual filters are down. What they point toward is worth noting. The domain they keep gesturing at is the domain that deserves your attention. People behaving in surprising ways. The Venus-Uranus activation has been running through everyone in your environment simultaneously, and the behavioral shifts it is producing in the people around you are as informative as what you are experiencing internally. The person who has been distant makes unexpected contact. The relationship that seemed fixed in a particular pattern reveals a new dimension. Someone you had categorized in a specific way shows you something that revises the category. These behavioral surprises are not simply interesting data points. They are updates to the picture of your relational landscape, and under the current conditions, they are coming from a relatively unfiltered place. The social management that usually keeps genuine feelings and genuine priorities beneath the surface is running at lower efficiency right now. What people are showing you today is worth taking seriously. The urgency of this moment is specific. Clarity of this kind, the clarity that arrives after a significant eclipse cycle in combination with a disruptive Uranian activation, has a limited window of maximum availability. In the days that follow the activation, as the energy gradually settles back toward ordinary operating conditions, the insights and recognitions that are sharply visible today will begin to integrate into background awareness. They will not disappear entirely, but they will lose the vivid, immediate quality that makes them so impossible to look away from right now. The decision to engage with what you are seeing today, while it is this clear and this present, is more straightforward than the same decision will be in a week, when the clarity has dimmed slightly and the ordinary comfortable patterns have begun to reassert themselves. This is why distraction and hesitation carry real costs in this window. Staying busy enough to avoid sitting with the clarity is a choice, even when it does not feel like one. The discomfort of seeing something you cannot unsee, of knowing something that has implications you have not yet worked out how to act on, that discomfort generates a natural pull toward the activities and conversations and distractions that keep the uncomfortable knowing at arm's length. Every time you reach for that pull today, something real slips a little further from its most accessible position. The practical orientation for today runs through one central principle: meet the clarity with honesty rather than management. When a realization arrives today, when something about a situation or a relationship or your own desires becomes suddenly uncomfortably clear, stay with it long enough to let it fully register. Do not immediately reach for the explanation that softens it or the alternative interpretation that restores the comfortable ambiguity. Do not immediately begin planning the action that would address it, because action taken before the realization has fully registered often addresses the surface of what was seen rather than the depth of it. Stay with the knowing first. Let it complete its arrival. Ask yourself what it is actually telling you in its clearest and most honest form. Then write it down. This is the single most useful practical action available to you today. The act of writing a realization in plain language externalizes it in a way that makes it more concrete, more examinable, and more likely to survive the natural drift back toward comfortable ambiguity that happens as the activation settles. The realization you write down today is available to you next week in a way that the one you thought about but did not record is not. You do not need to act on everything you see today. That would be both exhausting and inadvisable, since Mercury is still retrograde, and some of the indicated actions are better executed when the communication environment has cleared. What you do need to do is see it clearly, acknowledge it honestly, and record it in a form that makes it actionable when the conditions are right. Some of the most significant shifts in a person's life are remembered not because of what happened externally, not because of the drama or the obvious upheaval, but because of what was realized internally during a particular window of heightened clarity. The event in the sky was the occasion. The realization it triggered in the person who was paying attention was the actual event. The blood moon eclipse, the March 3rd portal, the Venus-Uranus activation, these created the conditions. What you do with those conditions, what you allow yourself to see and to know and to acknowledge honestly about where your life is and where it needs to go, that is where the significance lives. Today is one of those days that some people will look back on and recognize as a turning point, not because of anything dramatic that happened externally, because of what they finally allowed themselves to know. Pay attention. Let the clarity arrive. Write down what you see. The moment of genuine recognition, received fully and recorded honestly, is the shift. Everything that follows is the integration of it,